You ready? Nice job. Yeah. Okay, calling the July 13th special meeting of the Ridgway Planning Commission to order. Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Ellison,
Here.
Lisk,
This away.
Montague,
Yes.
Nelson,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Meyer,
Here.
Mayor Clark,
Here.
and Chairperson Kenwright.
Here.
All right,
The first and only item is a public hearing. The application is for preliminary plat for Riverfront Village Planned Unit Development, location Triangle Subdivision Lot 1, address to be determined Highway 550, zone General Commercial GC, applicant Joel Cantor, Alpine Homes Ridgway LLC, owner Alpine Homes Ridgway LLC. EJ.
Well, excellent. Guess I'm up. So thank you all for allowing the special meeting here this evening. So I'm going to go through my staff report pretty quickly. Here's my presentation. The staff report is pretty comprehensive. So I want to leave plenty of time for if there are questions to have substantive discussion if needed. So I'm going to go through pretty quickly. But so what we have is a Lot 1 Triangle Subdivision, which was previously platted in 1992. Lot 1 is a total of 8.14 acres and includes both the east and west side of the river. A portion of Lot 1, which is referred to as Lot 1R on the documents that you're seeing, is what we're talking about this evening. The remainder of that parcel was actually deeded to the town in 2008. So the town is adjacent to this parcel. The PUD and preliminary plat, as I mentioned, are for a portion of Lot 1, referred to as Lot 1R, containing 4.29 acres. The owner is requesting a PUD zoning to allow for multi-building mixed-use development on a portion of that lot, to be known as Riverfront Village PUD. The project includes a total of 38 residential units, 4 commercial units, and the commercial units total approximately 3,980 square feet of ground floor commercial in a mixed-use building. The uses of each of the buildings are actually shown in the table, thanks Preston, in the staff report. The code requirements, the procedures and standards are actually laid out in the staff report as well. I won't go through here. However, that is what we're going to be talking about. If the Planning Commission finds that all of those standards have been met, then the recommendation for approval should be made. Talking about the standards, the project has gone through, as you all know, a variety of iterations and revisions over the last few months. We started a public hearing process in April, got continued and a few times to get us here to today. The latest version that staff has been able to fully review and provide comments on to the applicant was a mid-June submission. Comments were provided to the applicant in a letter dated July 2nd. That letter was included in your staff report as attachment 15, I believe it was. The applicant team has submitted responses to those comments in July 8th. That resubmission and those responses are included in your staff report as attachment 16. While staff has not been able to completely complete a full review of those documents in preparation for tonight's meeting, we have tried to provide general comments and summary of those items and some of the outstanding concerns that we might have in the gray boxes in the staff report. I tried to clarify that a little bit through there. It's a little bit cumbersome, but I'm sure there'll be some questions about what all that means. So that's just how we laid that out. So as I mentioned, I won't go through it all, but please feel free to ask questions of me and staff as we go through that. So with all of that, we have tried to provide some comment or conditions that we feel if those conditions are met, the application meets the standards of the code. And so those are the recommendation that we would, if the planning commission so finds, staff would recommend that the preliminary PUD plan and the preliminary plat application to the town, applications be recommended for approval to the town council with the following conditions. One, a landscape plan be updated to include a table that clearly indicates the calculation of required number of trees and shrubs, distribution of trees and shrubs in the front yard area, and calculates and identifies the ground cover type as required in section 664G of RMC and accepted by town staff prior to the PUD plan and preliminary plat application being considered by the town council. I apologize, it's going to be a little bit mundane right now, but I need to read these into the record. Two, the lighting plan be updated to identify the correlated color temperature of each fixture as required in section 651A5 of the RMC and accepted by town staff prior to the PUD plan and preliminary plat being considered by the town council. Three, the master sign plan be updated and to comply with the maximum of 195 square feet of sign area as required by section 7317J3E2 of the RMC and accepted by town staff prior to the PUD plan and preliminary plat application being considered by the town council. Four, the outstanding engineering comments dated June 22nd, 2021 in attachment 16 be adequately addressed by the applicant and acceptable to town staff prior to the PUD plan and preliminary plat being considered by the town council. And condition 5, easements dedicated on the preliminary plat shall meet town standards and be accepted by the town staff prior to the PUD plan and preliminary plat application being considered by the town council. So hopefully that was somewhat short and sweet. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that commissioners might have.
All right. Thank you, TJ. Would the applicant like to add anything to the presentation?
I have some slides to show, just an update for you as things have changed, to give you a little visual. I don't want to take too much time, but I do want to, underscore a few things about the proposal. Oh, that's all right. So we're all familiar with the site. I just wanted to underscore a few things here. We do see this as a great opportunity for a neighborhood with the pedestrian connectivity to town, with the bridge, pedestrian bridge adjacent to the existing commercial, and then a river walk that would tie into a park area that we've developed that really is right at the front of the property as you come down the hill from 550 right here. These bubbles just show, the compatibility with the existing area being residential across the street and incorporating residential tucked in here, and then commercial tying to the other commercial as well. Development, I think the park was introduced maybe in April when we met on Zoom. But here's the trail we all know, and then invigorating this pedestrian trail as a concrete riverfront walk leading to a park, and then also a locals trail into lot 2. Thank you. And this shows just the layout of the buildings and so forth that I think you all are very familiar with. This shows a trail that takes off next to lot 2, the river trail leading to the river park. If there's any questions about square footage, the advantage of what we've done here is we've tried to create a major amount of open space as we can within the development here, creating lawn areas, and every building and every unit is tuck under parking within the buildings, townhomes, the multifamily buildings, the triplexes. These are the two triplexes. These 4 units above the commercial do not have garages, but they're, that parking lot is dedicated here for the residents on the second floor of that building. We've talked about the river restoration, but this is essentially where the river trail will go and tie into a river park. And here's some of the added information that, we've added a community picnic pavilion to the park with some concrete activity, cornhole, and barbecue. And there's the other view of it. So this structure would be maintenance-free, it would be steel, and it would sit there adjacent to the trail, connecting to the view of the river, and creating a central feature within that park. And the emphasis of this park coming in on the 550 route, we believe would be an interesting, picturesque way of the gateway, invigorating the gateway to the town. This is just some views of the river front, the townhomes, the opportunities at the trail, and just some visuals to pull that together in a fashion as we are designing it, the concrete, some restoration along the river, and tying to the eventual park. This is the commercial building that and it's at the corner of the access drive to the commercial building. This drive is down south, connecting all the townhomes. The main feature of this corner area the building has been designed with potentially 4 units for commercial use. And then the corner unit creating a community space. And you can see here in this, this is the plan of the building, this is the corner, that's the corner there. Just visuals to help you see the design elements that we're bringing forth. This is, these pictures are of a project in Telluride, Longwell 16. It's indicative of the momentum we're looking at, the design elements for the interiors, and just the idea of tuck under parking, and then 2 levels of units. One thing about these units are, we are accessing the units from the sides, so that enables, you don't have a double loaded corridor, you break up how many people enter the building through 3 different stairs. And the other aspect of that is we're able to front load the buildings with the view and daylight with the living areas and place the bedrooms in the back, living bedrooms, entries are on the sides. Just wanted to share with you some of the aspects of developing the design of the townhomes, duplexes, in coordination with the code requirement that no 2 buildings will look alike. And we have done that mainly with windows, fenestration, and elements of the building changing from a flat entry sequence roof to a gable. So we feel that going further would be difficult to lend itself to a cost-effective approach to the project. So I just wanted to share that. And then this is the triplex building. The unique aspect about this is this building is mirrored. So already you're getting some different visuals for the building, looking at them. They're mirrored. They're not directly next to each other. This is a driveway in to tuck under parking. There's one unit on the ground floor, 2 units. One is above the parking. And we did the same approach there where we are using windows and materials to break that facade up and meet the code requirement. This is simply a slide to show the mix of materials throughout the project, combination of composite wood materials, some stone, composite panel, and corrugated and board and batten composite materials and accents of wood. Briefly, the landscape and variety of vegetation we're looking at. Just another detail of some of that vegetation, how it might be integrated into the pedestrian areas. And then the sign plan for the commercial building and the entryway, the neighborhood sign at the park. And this has been configured to meet and be under the square footage. We're at 192 square feet to meet the code requirement for that. Just wanted to share the schedule with you. If this process is gaining momentum, and we really appreciate TJ's efforts and working with him, it's been a pleasure and very fruitful. And we would. This schedule shows moving forward with planning commission potentially this summer and 100% CDs for the civil work, and then potentially moving earth in the fall or early winter. That's the momentum that we hope to keep with, and it relates to the cost of the project and so forth. So we're encouraged with everything that's happened in the past couple months, and we just want to keep moving forward. I'll end on this view. And we agree and are encouraged with regards to the recommended conditions as noted. We also encourage a series of in-person meetings. I know it's been difficult because of the past year and a half, but to have in-person meetings and work with your staff to meet the conditions in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing, and at this point, I will open the hearing for any public comment. Identify yourself if you want to speak, and give your name and address. Okay, close public comment. I have a question for staff, TJ. The notation, we've been challenged on time, and we've set a special meeting. And with the short timelines, what I'm looking at is your statement on the conditions are that these items are still to be taken care of. They said, accepted by town staff prior to the PUD plan and preliminary plat application being considered by town council. So you're proposing that the issues be resolved before it's posted that it's it's going, I mean, we're looking at, if we're trying to get through this month, then you're looking at getting the responses and get it resolved within the next 2 weeks.
That is correct. And so the conditions are purposefully open-ended for that. They want to, because I think there's a balance between what the applicant needs as far as understanding of the concepts, and we're working through the details. So I think we're at a point where if the planning commission is comfortable with it, understanding and agreeing to the concept, while staff works through the details with the applicant. And the point is to not set that public hearing with town council until staff is okay with all of those documents. So does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
And however long, I don't want to give false hope necessarily if we're going to be at the October meeting or the September meeting or whatever it is. We want to make sure that it's a thorough document before we go to town council.
You're confident that we're going to get there.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
No,
I
because
guess the thing that we keep running into previously is the deadline of getting it done.
Yeah.
And the notice thing. And we always find ourselves this last minute of let's hurry up and get it done, and it's not quite there. So I think what this is doing, and as the applicant mentioned too, these last few months have been really fruitful, but in an effort to try to show good faith in moving the project forward, while also being considerate of the town's needs to make sure that every standard is met, we felt this was a decent compromise.
how do council members feel about that?
Well, we're going to rely on staff to get us there, I think. Staff and the applicant working together. Yeah, I think it's doable. I mean, it's sort of what we're challenged by and presented with, figure it out. So I think,
I have some questions.
yeah.
Is this, are they all for sale? Or is it rental?
They're for sale, and there are 4 deed restricted units within a number of the buildings. And Joel and I found each other with my work in Telluride for affordable housing. And he's really interested in his team is creating something that's cost effective, but attractive and attainable, largely with the local population. We all know we need housing. And he has mentioned that he can control things, given the nature of the project budget and the unit, the cost of the units and so forth.
So the deed restricted units are also for sale?
Yes, correct.
And TJ, that sale will be based on town criteria to meet that qualification?
Yes. The caveat to that, though, is that the deed restricted provisions are in the development agreement. That draft agreement was presented and included in your packet. It's a pretty dense document, but there's a section in there on that. You would notice that there's some blanks in there. We haven't quite gotten through all of that yet. But that is a document that the planning commission, that document is approved by the town council. It's an agreement. So we threw it in there with some conditions. So if there are some conditions or caveats that the planning commission would like to have in there, we can consider those as well. But the planning commission is not approving the development agreement, and therefore the deed restricted language is not specified at this time, but will be.
For the for the council to approve?
Correct. And there is a note on the plat that ties the plat to the development agreement for the deed restricted covenants and the short-term rental. I don't want to get into that, but that's how we're tying those items together with a note on the plat and then the detail in the development.
So this may not be a question for planning, it may be a council question, which you can tell me if that's the case, but does the deed restriction go away in the case of a foreclosure?
I mean, the mayor's shaking his head, I would say no. I don't know those documents.
I was just, in reading the actual PUD documents, it refers to deed restricted units. It says that they will remain in perpetuity. And I don't know that it mentions the word foreclosure specifically, but it seemed to me, it answered my concerns about it being really truly in perpetuity.
I asked that because I think it becomes an issue when you try to get financing. Banks are very leery of that. And I know in Telluride, most of the foreclosures would go away if, most of the deed restriction would go away if there's foreclosure, but the town or the county, whatever government entity was ruling that would have the option to buy it out, was how they could save it. So just.
The only thing I would say is that that language has been drafted by the town attorney.
Okay.
And Preston, I wasn't involved in the Lena Street discussion, but I believe that it is identical to that language. So
I'll follow up elsewhere, just curious.
Yep.
I'm not going to change it.
no, that's good. I think it's a good discussion to have. We'll make sure that that's through the ensuing discussions, we'll make sure that that's, I believe that that's the intent. So we'll make sure that that's true.
Hey guys, if you hear me, this is Tom Kennedy. I'm the attorney who drafted it for the applicant. If you look at section 3.1, it says it shall survive any foreclosure. So right there in section 3.1, it says.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
And I had a question about the short-term rentals for Preston, for the town. Does the short-term rentals have to have a license, correct, from the town to do the short-term rentals? And so that takes up 10 out of the 50, is that correct?
Is that right, based on the formula in those buildings?
I believe so.
Or teacher?
There's only 10 units that can be short-term rented. There's the
Right.
townhouses. There's nothing that says that all 10 of them will be short-term.
Correct.
But in order to be short-term rented, they have to get a license.
I just wanted to know how many short-term rental licenses are out there right now.
I think I think right now it's right above 30. So I'll double check on that. Good question, but
25,
so we have about 20, maybe a little less than 20 open, available.
And where I was kind of going with that was I just want to make sure we have enough short-term rental licenses for the town, including these new developments. So to change that.
Well, my take would be, I don't think we necessarily want all these to be, all 10 of them, the townhomes to be short-term rentals. If our licenses are sold out, they'll be in line to get a short-term rental license the next time one comes available. I don't see them, rushing out the door. So I don't see it as a problem. I mean, if you're saying we might need to up our number from 50, I don't think we're there yet, but it's a good point.
Yeah, so we'll just wait and see.
That'd be my take.
I had one more question. It might be a little late in the process and it's probably been addressed in the town code, but you were pointing out the parking available. Most of them are underneath. There's some that are on the side. Is there a provision for visitor parking? Is there space?
Yes, we have provided visitor parking and more parking that's required as a minimum for the commercial space. And I would have to look at my plan.
I don't need exact numbers. I would assume, I'm new to planning, but I would assume that the town code would address that.
I believe it does.
Yeah, we meet the parking, we exceed the parking requirements.
Excellent.
There's
Because it's
a,
always an issue.
there is a sense in the staff report that says that if one of those commercial units ends up being something like a restaurant that would require more parking, that may change, but what they use the one space per 250 square feet criteria.
So how could you change it if it became a restaurant after it's built?
That's a good question.
So the way that it would work, because again, what we're doing right now is entitlement, right? Zoning allowances, you can do on a piece of property, and it has a width this wide, right? It's commercial. When you get to the building permit for a specific use, then you have to readjust to make sure. So that's what it would be. If at that point, if the building permit were to come in and the parking requirements would be increased, and say they didn't provide enough to meet the aggregate number of parking spaces required, we'd have to either provide more parking on site or go through a variance process before that building permit would be issued by town.
Theoretically, could also be restricted by the order in which commercial projects
Correct.
come in for approval, and if they've already used up the allowable parking and a restaurant comes in, it might be like, sorry, can't do a restaurant.
Yeah, or the other way around, right? So a restaurant came in first, took up more than their fair share at this moment of parking, then the last one in might be stuck with less.
And some
So the best we can say right now is that, yes, based on the information we have, it meets the standards.
But if they don't provide for a restaurant from the get-go, then we may be short on parking. If one decided they wanted to come.
Correct. Yeah, based on the end uses. Same as like a convenience shop, right, or something like that, something that had more parking generation or trip generation, rather than just an office or something like that.
And I'll add that in the front of the site, in the location of the commercial building, there is the ability to expand probably 30%
For parking.
for the commercial.
Yeah, and I guess I would say based on the way that we reviewed the parking was tied directly to the adjacent building. So each of the residential buildings provide adequate parking for the use, so the residential unit itself, plus there's a couple of extra visitor spots in the vicinity. So it kind of, if you think about it, I parsed it off into little segments of the building footprint plus the adjacent parking. So the moral of that story is that regardless of what happens on the commercial side, there will still be plenty of and adequate parking required and provided for the residential units. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I have a couple questions too. You ready?
And Thomas has his hand raised.
Oh, sorry. Thomas can go first since he's had his hand raised.
Okay, hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you. I have just one quick question right now. I'll ask another one later on, but does the applicant know, have a kind of a ballpark idea of what they're going to target listing the for sale units for in kind of their breakdown and of the finances? Do they come up with a, kind of a target price point?
Can't remember off the top of my head. But that
has been generated at one point.
That was going to be my question too. I mean, when while you're looking, I'll just say, there's comments in your submittal letter saying that, on top of the deed restricted units, your goal here is to make all of these units, quote unquote, attainable. I don't know if that's the word you use, but more affordable market rate than maybe other things in town, just by the size and the construction techniques you're going to use. I was just going to throw out on top of Thomas's comment that we've heard that before and it hasn't usually worked out. So I'd like to have something on the record that maybe, obviously we can't hold you to it. We're talking market rate, but I think it's important that if you're going to make that claim, that there be some record of it, so that if it doesn't work out that way, we can sort of go, hey, what happened at least? Because that's a huge issue here, obviously.
I will say that the project has been developed with a multiple types of units. So we have the larger multi-family units in the center, which obviously are more economical to build. And then we have the townhomes, and we have triplexes. And then we also have some units above the commercial. So we believe that there is a stratification also within that realm that's going to allow various levels of income attainment of the units. But I would have to, I have not had any direct search firm that was involved stuff.
Yeah, I just think it's worth pointing out that the real estate market in Ridgway, like so many places in the last 6 months or years, just exploded. We've got $1 million homes, we've got townhomes going on the market for $850 to $950. You know, it's crazy, and we need to do everything we can to kind of buck that trend. So
Thank
How
you,
do
John.
you arrive at 4 deed restricted units?
roughly 10%.
Yeah, it was through the land use code.
We don't have a discretionary zoning thing, but we always tried to negotiate at least 10%.
And that's what you've done over on this one?
It was 38 units, 4 units is a little more than 10%.
And then there's no set price on the deed restriction.
It's all based on the
resale?
AMI. No, it's based on the AMI.
Tied to your regulations.
Yeah,
And also the development agreement specifies the AMI. Average median income that it would strive for. And I think there's also a amount of the word
cap.
Yeah, like a cap on
Appreciation.
as well. So those are all spelled out. I think, as was mentioned, those aren't necessarily in the code, but it's negotiated, and that I'll call it the town standard language is included in the development agreement covering those items.
okay. Have any luck there?
No luck, sorry.
Well, we can come back to that. You think you'll be able to find it
I
tonight?
think I'll be able to find it. I'll let you know
Okay.
when I get there. Sorry.
Thomas, did you have anything else now?
Thank you, John. First of all, let me just thank you, John, again for helping support my comment, because I think we've all seen some things happen recently that are, kind of shocking, and the Lena Street Commons is a good example of something that, has just recently gone up as a good indicator. And I think most of the people I know felt that the starting price or asking price for a lot of those units was surprisingly much higher than, we thought was, appropriate for, the community and what the community can sustain. And obviously, I think that's why there's a lot of concern for this project and any project in that regard right now, because we know that the cost of construction and everything, it just makes things, expensive. That said, I just want to also go back for a second and say that I think that this project is a great project. I think it's going to, be suitable and appropriate for the site. I'm very excited about the team that's been put together. I think the architecture and the design, I think, is going to be really wonderful to have. And I also applaud the intent and background behind the design and what the developers want to do in terms of using better materials, a lot of open space, all these wonderful concepts. And so, I'm completely in support of that. I do just want to throw out and reiterate probably my biggest concern about this project and its impact on the community and everything is really about the circulation off of the highway and so forth. And I know it's been a bit of a sticky subject. I know there's been some what we call it, reviews or evaluations around how the traffic is going to work. But I just wanted to, first of all, maybe ask the applicant or find out from staff, has CDOT pretty much signed off on this, and is it, giving us the thumbs up? Because I think, I don't really feel comfortable approving this project, which I want to support, if that certainly is not buttoned up in a satisfactory manner, because I'm concerned, and I think you all understand why. It's a sticky little design challenge that is not one that offers an easy solution. So thank you.
Well, CDOT is waiting. We have the ability to get, we've been approved. Basically, from the standpoint of the concept of the egress and access off the highway, we will apply for the CDOT permit for construction. I think that's what's left of that process. We've had a number of traffic studies and analysis. So they will grant us and review the project for approval for the access construction once we have an approved project from the town. That's where we're at with CDOT. They have reviewed the plans and they have addressed some changes within the lanes and so forth along the highway in that regard. And those documents are within our packet.
And this is TJ. I just wanted to add that for this point in the process, CDOT has given all of the necessary approvals. As you're probably aware, their process is a little bit slower than, interesting comment, but it's a little slower than the towns on this regard, because what they do is they wait to really review it. So they provide you some general concepts and feedback on the trips generated and if the intersection can handle it. They can. They've provided that permit, that access permit, and then when they go to construction, that's where their comments are going to get really heavy. Lane configuration, access design, whether it's full movement, 3/4, right in, right out, turn lanes, all that stuff. They're going to scrutinize that down the road, and that's one of the town requirements that have to be met, prior to, I guess, the submittal of the final plat, since it's an off-site improvement. So it's a really long-winded way of saying that at this point, CDOT has granted all of the appropriate approvals necessary.
Okay.
And they have,
Sorry, go ahead.
they've also indicated what is going to happen in the road with the lanes and turn lanes from the construction standpoint.
Okay, well, thank you, gentlemen, for your answers. That's helpful. I appreciate that.
Does the applicant have to pay for those improvements that CDOT will do to that highway?
I believe so.
I believe so.
The process and the improvements.
Did you have some luck?
Yes, I found it. So from last month, we're looking about $550 a square foot for this project, the sale price, but obviously that's probably going to change. Units won't even be for sale for quite some time anyway, so let's see where the market is.
That would be the sale price, $550 a square foot?
Correct.
So help us out here. I don't know where to find the square footage of the units.
They were, so the townhomes are approximately 1,800 square feet. 3-bedroom condos are between 1,200 and 1,300. The 2-bedroom condos are between 860 square feet to 1,200 square feet, and the 1-bedroom condos are 700 to 800 square feet.
Somebody like those.
That's done.
So townhomes, approximately 1 million. 3-bedroom condos, 650 to 700,000. 2-bedroom condos, 475,000 up to 690,000. 1-bedroom condos, 400 to 450.
What's that?
Unfortunately,
That's like the reality of,
yeah.
So I would like, obviously when this thing goes to market, might not likely have the same square footage for an internal site.
Raw footage.
We can all understand that 500 square foot to be on the river, have your own driveway is one thing, but so it obviously needs to go through more market analysis.
Yeah, this is the rough draft. So,
But what I'd like to say is this was designed with that in mind, that there would be different price points based on the location, if you're stacked, if you have nobody above you, and so forth.
Okay. Well, I think the important thing for me is just to have there be a record in the minutes that we're going to hold you guys to this. You're making claims in your presentation that that's one of your major goals, and that's really important to us. I think that couldn't be stressed more. That's probably about all we can say at this point on that. Again, sort of piggybacking on Thomas's last concern, the access and traffic flow even within the development. Am I correct that the south entrance close to the traffic light is emergency only?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And the only entrance is the one that's at the north end. And
Correct.
that's going to access this entire development as well as the dispensary. It's on whatever
Correct.
number. that
Yep,
is.
lot 2.
Okay. I've been saying this throughout this whole process, and I just can't say it enough. We need another emergency access, and I know the Riverbank minor subdivision, that whole south side property line. I mean, there's a natural place for emergency access there, and I know that that property owner doesn't want it. I think it's my recollection. I think we need to try and make that happen. I think that's really important that when you look, and it's mentioned in the staff report, it's mentioned somewhere in the notes and dialogue in the presentation. If there's some sort of blockage of Riverfront Drive or even Jasper Lane close to that entrance, there's no way out. So, it's just, I think it's really important that there be more than that one entrance and that one emergency access that really doesn't, the emergency access doesn't really do much because it doesn't access the majority of the projects where all the homes are. I mean, maybe you can drive through that kind of parking lot extension that's directly south of the commercial building and get to the homes there. But if you can, it's not clear. So I just think access, and particularly emergency access, is really important, and I don't think it's been really addressed.
Has the fire marshal signed off on this design?
Yes, we have met with the fire marshal and developed the circular drive behind the M3 building. If you want to advance, one more, please. There's this circular drive was developed in dialogue with the fire marshal.
I don't see how that helps when it doesn't connect to the paved area in front of the commercial building.
I may be speaking out of turn, but that red arrow may indicate something to be investigated, quite frankly.
It certainly looks like it, doesn't it?
The
parking lot behind
behind the building. Annie's. I mean, that property is owned by the developer.
Your developer. Oh, okay.
So I don't want to speak out of turn about your father, but, if push came to shove, that would be one thing to think about as a alternate.
Yeah, I think something needs to be done that gives a more clear emergency access for, if something serious happens in front of the commercial building.
I would support what John's saying as well, because, I see the circular drive. That certainly makes sense, a good radius for the vehicles to get around and so forth, but it's still not addressing the issue of there's really just one access in and out, and it's rather pinched at that. So, and I'm sure everyone understands what we're hoping for, but if there's a way to work it out, it certainly would be a critical component to increasing some safety there for the density that's there.
And maybe that's something that we can just add as a condition, so you guys can move forward and be able to work it out. I'm open to that. Trying to remember if there's anything else I had. Anybody else have questions?
Is it helpful to make that entrance into the residential wider? The little median thing to the north, perhaps? Because, people pull up and stop because they're gonna do God knows what. And then if it's only 2 car widths there is what it looks like, that is pretty tight.
Well, one thing about widths of roads is that the wider they are, the tendency may be to drive faster. We are developing this as a residential street that would have with the number of units and the number of families potentially there, kids playing in the yards. I think wider could encourage faster.
Well, and certainly not the whole road. I was just speaking to the entrance, and I'm guessing then that's a standard width for a street, a side street, TJ?
Yes.
We're talking
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Sorry, I missed the question.
My question was, is that just a standard width for a street, and there's no point in making that? Just with the commercial in the front there, it just seems like, and no other in or out, it seems like that could be quite a bottleneck.
Yeah, so there's a couple of questions in one. I'll parse it apart, because I want to be clear that these are private internal access roads, but not necessarily to town road standards. So really what we, in that case, what we defer to is essentially fire access, which requires an unimpeded 12-foot width. So when we look at that, we look at, okay, if there's a park, if somebody is parking there, I believe it's 24 feet.
That's what it says.
Which is a standard width for such a circulation. Basically, a drive aisle, if you think about between parking spaces and parking lot, is at 90-degree parking stalls is 24 feet. So that's the standard that we've applied here. This section up here, which is the access road, if you will, to lot 2, that driveway width, I believe, is still 24 feet, but the width, including both the sidewalks and parking, is I believe it's 40. I think is what you get over. It's over 40. So we've kind of pushed a little bit different on that. So that's a really, the answer is yes. I think that it meets the standards and it should flow. That doesn't mean that there's going to be someone who parks there, runs in, gets a coffee, puts their hazards on, and causes some frustration.
Well, and I bring that up because it wouldn't change the buildings there to just decrease the little tree area
Over here.
over to the other side.
That's-
Yeah, there.
Yep.
If that was going to help with in and out, I don't know.
Yeah, I can just say in the development of this, we mindfully designed that intersection to work with pedestrians, commercial, and having, it doesn't bottleneck, it does turn a little bit. And, you know, that was purposeful because, you know, we've all seen communities that do this, that by kind of turning it here, if that went straight, you'd be maybe encouraged to go faster and blow the stop sign and so forth. So there was some thoughtful movements here in the design of that.
My only consideration, and I understand what you're talking about, the width of that, and I understand the concerns, but if we turn those townhomes into short-term rentals, is that gonna be sufficient width of the drive for somebody pulling their pickup and a trailer with two side-by-sides on the back who's coming to short-term? Because it's gonna happen. So just think about that.
Each of those has garages.
Each has a 2-car garage and a 20-foot space in front. Some have more, some have double that, so that, you know, 28, some of them. So some of them are deeper than others, but they all have, you can see, they all have, they can potentially park 4 cars, 2 in the garage and 2 out front.
Yeah, I see your point, Russ. I hate, you know, planning. I've always been, I mean, actually, I've had a full change of mind since 35 years ago when I started working on this stuff. Used to be, everything used to be wider and bigger and deeper. I don't like planning for the absolute worst scenario anymore, just because I think it makes things, we have more asphalt, more, you know, that we've had, over the years, we've had lots of people request narrow road widths, and the town has always stuck really hard to our road standards. Again, these aren't rights of way, these are private roads. I've come full circle to where I think narrow roads are okay, as long as they're wide enough for emergency access.
And I don't have a concern with the width of the road, it's that entrance there. Somebody coming in with that truck, with that trailer behind, is there enough room for them to actually safely negotiate that turn?
I'm guessing there is, because I'm guessing the fire department.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
If the fire truck can navigate that, then certainly. And to that point, I was gonna say it earlier, but I'll mention it now, that this has been sent to the fire district for review, and we have not received comments back, therefore insinuating that they're okay with it. I never want to, you know, you can't prove the negative, if you will, but
I have a staff question to go along with that. Those are private roads. Our short-term rental regs require that you provide, the owner provides minimum of 2 spaces and any other spaces so that their guests can be totally off the road. But that doesn't appear to anticipate private roads. So
that's correct. And at this point, you know, as Jim mentioned, just about all of these, let's just take away the 4 units above the commercial building at this point. The rest of these all have garages plus a driveway to handle at least the 2 parking spaces. Some have more. Plus, there's this parking right here in the middle in both of these, in this loop. This portion right here for additional guest parking. And then there are a few of these over here. I don't quote me on this, but basically this whole area here is allocated to residential parking and guest parking. This stuff up here is allocated towards the commercial use, just generally speaking. So I guess to answer the question a little bit more bluntly is I think that there's adequate parking to meet that standard throughout the project.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, excuse me. Good evening again. I just also probably once again want to reiterate what John just said, which is I applaud you guys for going to the narrower design. There's obviously lots of support out there for it being safer for children and all of that. I think that's totally appropriate. I think my biggest concern, again, as John was just saying, is not just can an emergency vehicle fit down there, which it certainly can, but my understanding is that a fire department always needs to have a way to get that same vehicle out if things get worse. And at this point, you know, in some cases, that's where the bottleneck was a little bit of a concern of mine. But if the fire department or fire marshal says, you know, I'm comfortable with setting my vehicles in there the way it's shown, then great. And, you know, I think that these are good design firm here that is well thought out about the parking. That this is why I like what you guys have done. I think there's a lot of good analysis here and thought, but I just want to make sure that the fire trucks don't get stuck there. That's my biggest concern. But otherwise, I think the circulation will probably be just fine. Thank you.
I'd like to see staff reach out to the fire district and rather than just assume.
Make sure they got it.
Yeah.
I just made the note. Good. We'll
John, are
certainly
you
do that.
funding and requiring access where that arrow is?
Sounds like that was.
So that arrow was to show that that's the local trail to lot 2 that takes off right at the corner of the southwest corner of the lot. That was a request during a number of the meetings later last year and earlier this year. So that arrow, maybe it's intuitive that I made it large enough for a vehicle, but it wasn't. That's my only thought is, could that be?
There's some topography issues over here on the south side, correct?
Yes, there's a toe of a slope. I took my Jeep over it,
River.
but yeah, there's some difficulty there as well. We're going to add a additional emergency access, and the fact that the lot to the south of the commercial building is also owned by the developer. I feel like I'm speaking out of turn, but there could be an opportunity here because we had heard this come up. We meet CDOT standards. We've met with the fire marshal. Things seem to be okay, but we hear every time we have heard your notations.
I remember the other thing I wanted to ask, if it's okay. There's some comments in the dialogue in the presentation, the packet, talking about the river corridor encroachment, particularly the area that's between 25 and 75 feet from a floodplain line. And I guess I was kind of thinking that was someplace where we might need an additional condition, or remind us of what the issue is there.
Sure. So the issue is that the code requires all developments to be outside of the 75-foot setback from a high water mark. There's an additional provision in the code that allows for development within the between 25-foot setback and 75-foot setback to be allowed through a conditional use process. So essentially the way that it was described in the staff report and going through a PUD process, essentially if you approve the PUD, you're approving all of the conditional uses that would be otherwise required. That would also include variances as well, so setbacks and things like that. That's why in the, I don't remember if it's on this one or not, but we did have, one of the big comments was to identify the setbacks of each of the buildings to the high water mark. And so I can't recall exactly if it's in the document that was presented or in the revisions. I apologize for that, but the idea is that the final document will call out the specific setback between the high water mark and the building setbacks themselves, or the buildings themselves. so that when we go to construction, we have that called out. And it affects, I think, just 3 buildings, the 2 triplexes and the 1 duplex here. Or maybe both of these, you can't really tell exactly where it goes there.
It's basically the corner of this building and a little bit of this building. And then
And there's a river trail there,
Yeah, the river trail goes through that.
yes,
and that's gonna be concrete or gravel?
I think it's gonna be correct.
Concrete,
concrete is what
concrete.
the town has requested in
So the design would be a 10-foot,
8.
8-foot concrete path with a 2-foot gravel shoulder.
And that's appropriate to put concrete that close to the river?
Your iPad went to sleep. Preston. Oh, the iPad.
Preston, you went to sleep and your iPad went to sleep.
That is the, I'll call it the industry standard for trails. Actually, the industry standard is 10-foot plus a 2-foot soft surface trail next to it, even along the river corridor.
Because I know the Telluride, not to keep quoting Telluride, but that's my most recent experience is gravel along, because it's really close to the river. And it floods out sometimes, which if it, you can repair, I think, a gravel soft surface easier than you could repair concrete if it were to be undercut by water.
So there, the applicant might be able to speak further to this, but we do have, this is one of the things we're still working through with staff, is as far as, I think there are 2 items that I want to break that comment into 2 things. One being the floodplain. I don't even, is this outside the floodplain? I believe that it is outside the
largely
floodplain.
outside and above.
Right. So the trail itself is outside of the floodplain. Then we have surface flow, because that's the natural flow to the river. And so we have the drainage, the surface drainage is done in such a way where it hits 4 locations, either 3 or 4 locations that will have culverts under the trail and flow into it, into the river under the trail. There's 4. And it's gone back and forth. So, so that's how we were addressing those items. There was actually some discussion whether or not to have a gravel trail or a concrete trail. Staff's position, the town's position was to have concrete because of the, to allow for, strollers and road bikes, those other items that need kind of a more hard surface. And I believe it's consistent with other town trails, as well as easier to maintain in the winter, plow, things like that. But of course, I think that's the.
I mean, I think as long as the drainage was addressed on it, then far be it for me to change the town codes.
But so the buildings need, to be outside the 75, correct? So they need 50.
We have a portion of the buildings that we are conditionally putting into the PUD to be within, beyond that 75-foot setback, nowhere near the 25 setback. And it's a small portion, and the code required us to evaluate the entire site and the entire ecological, we did an ecological study, and that really came to the understanding that the site has been nothing but over weeds and dump ground in some respect closer to the south portion of the site, and it basically had no natural attributes to the river corridor. And when we put the trail in as part of our conditional request for PUD, is we are going to repair the edge that's on our property, beautify it, and integrate the habitat that's natural to that area, and what you'd expect to see.
And so we can go ahead and approve it because we do have that study, correct?
Correct.
That correctly.
That's correct. Yep, so if you're within that 25 to 75, you have to do that ecological study. And then,
And that's in the documents, you can read
Yes.
what their observations were.
And then you were also asking. And then you guys were also asking for a height variance. Correct?
Yes, and that's for, and there's a limitation on the variance. We're not doing whatever we want. It's a condition for these two buildings. Large, because we want to park the cars underneath 2 stories of units, so that you get garages for the units, and they're within the site. So the other aspect of this, from a scale mass standpoint, 2 stories, 2 stories, 2 stories. And these are the only 3-story buildings that we're asking for that variance or conditional use. The benefit to the people that live there is the fact that we've reduced the asphalt, and they also have garages.
Yeah, I love that you guys did that. That was the whole reason why I wanted to have a variance in the first place, because I want people to have parking and then.
Great, thank you.
And then you have one more with the alley. Something about the alley.
yeah, so the code requires, and I'm going to paraphrase it, I don't remember this one exactly, but basically when you have a commercial use, you're required to have an alley for dumpsters, deliveries, things like that behind it. They're not providing that and not able to provide it. So essentially what they've done is, Jim, correct me where I missed this,
Yeah,
but
that's
basically
correct.
the design of the buildings or the units is so that refuse and other deliveries can be done through the back here and would utilize this parking lot.
It has an internal service corridor that resides at the back of the building with doorways on each end, but the main emphasis is the doorway to the dumpster and to that area of parking. The trajectory of that access would go in that direction. It's not to say that there's a circulation also because of code, 2 ways out. So there's a door here and a door here. There's a sidewalk here, and then this is the plaza that we believe is the community area, and then the 2 stairs access the upper units outside of that corridor. So there's no commingling, so to speak, of the service.
So where would the dumpsters go?
I believe it's right in the center of the parking lot here. Off the parking spaces
It's marked on
in the
the
drive.
So those units on the end are gonna be less expensive because you might smell garbage in the summertime?
And bears.
Gotta put the garbage somewhere. I think we got.
Is that a building or is
Keep in mind
it
that
just open?
I have designed a lot of multifamily units and garbage and containers and so forth. So what was your question?
Is that a structure or it's just open? Where the dumpsters are built for the commercial?
Yeah, that would probably end up becoming somewhat of a structure.
It'd have to be at least that.
Yeah,
Where
Bears out.
is the garbage for the residential unit?
so we've coordinated with the local.
Bruin?
Bruin, thank you. And they're on polycarts
Each residence will have a cart.
at their request.
And then do you guys set up like the HOA things? Like are those poly carts going to be required to be inside a garage or can they be outside people's units?
Maybe,
I think town code requires that they be inside your garage.
yeah, I can't imagine that you even want them outside if you're a resident, but people might get lazy, so that's why the HOA will have regulations and no HOAs, but you know, the property needs to be attractive. I can't speak to the decks and the HOA documents and how that is being evolved.
One clarification I just wanted to make on the variances. The stuff we were just talking about, building height and the setbacks from the high water mark are not variances. Those are allowed as conditional use up to a certain point. So that by doing the conditional use, and Jim mentioned it, that there's a cap on it. That cap is now, with the conditional use, we've approved up to 35-foot height by right, essentially, through the conditional use review. There are some variances in here that we mentioned, but I just wanted to clarify that difference.
So the same would be the issue with the high water mark. You're
Correct.
just allowing 3 buildings within that, the 25 to 75.
Correct.
And it's not the whole building, it's just very portions. Basically.
And then the only other thing I wrote down was I saw Mountain Annie wrote a letter to the town. And I didn't know how that applied, like did you guys take a look at it?
Well, the short answer is the developer, the same owner of this property, purchased the other property, therefore the access issues have gone away.
Okay, that's
The longer answer, which I'm known to give, is that there is still, because again, when we look at it from a town perspective, we have to look at it regardless of ownership, that there's legal access to each property. And the legal access is being provided through the existing access easement. And actually, it's one of the discussions that we've been having. But we feel that the access easement that was provided is still adequate to get legal access to lot 2 through lot 1. So yes, we looked at legal access to lot 2. We feel that it's fine regardless of ownership. That letter though, the specifics of that letter and the concerns of it have gone away simply by change of ownership.
including the signage.
Correct.
And just so everybody knows the history of this, every time there's been a development proposed for this lot, it's come up because it's always been known that eventually access for lot 2 was going to have to be to lot 1. Correct. It's always been understood, whether the people who operate businesses there know it and like it or not. It's always been the case.
But I think that comes back around, not to beat it to death, but the red arrow, and, you know, it was said that, well, it's the same owner, perhaps, maybe, but that could change and that could sell, and are we gonna make that, is that necessary? Are we making that part of it or not?
If I make the motion, I'm gonna make a motion that I'm gonna add a condition that says they have to make further allowance for emergency access, either from where that red arrow is or through the bank subdivision, whatever it is, they need additional.
Well, even if someone else makes the motion, you can add to it,
Yeah,
right?
I'm just.
Okay, because I appreciate the
I think we
comment
need
from
that
the
additional.
developer, but that's not good enough.
Yeah, we need a condition, an
Okay.
additional condition on top of the ones that the staff report has, in my opinion, that says we need better and more concrete emergency access.
And just, again, not so much long-winded, I'd like to make sure you understand how we're looking at it. if that were the condition, it wouldn't just be a note on a map or an arrow. We would be obligated to make sure there's legal secondary access, which would include an easement of sorts by separate instrument.
That's what I was.
So just because the condition is there doesn't mean, it means that we're gonna make sure that it's legal and sound.
And so far, I think that's the only thing that we've come up with in addition to what the recommendations are. Is that correct?
That I'm contacting the fire department, which it sounds like you already.
Yeah, do we need that?
I was gonna say, I don't know that you need to have that because we have, because of the other
It's part of the
comments.
It's part of it.
Okay.
Correct. And it's actually one of the comments of the engineering, one of the engineering comments talking about secondary access. So yeah, I think it falls under
She's
condition.
talking about potentially being another, having another condition that says that you will reach out.
Correct.
We don't need it.
I don't think so. I think it's covered and we hear it loud and clear.
Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, I guess I've got a couple other questions. I haven't had a chance to do a detailed review of the landscaping plans, but I assume that everything that's going in is either native, water-wise, or whatever the appropriate term is, because we're not pumping high quantities of water, trying to keep trees and turfs and things alive.
Yeah, Susan from DHM, I believe, is available to speak to this.
But what I'll say.
I'm here.
Oh, yeah, I think it would be great to hear what DHM has done.
DHM?
They're the landscape architects of Durango. They also supplied the ecological study. They have a whole ecological arm of their office.
Are you involved with the riparian work on the riverside as well?
I'm going to let her speak to your question.
Good.
Sometimes it's hard to hear. Can you please repeat the question?
Sure, the question was just, I said I've seen some of the planning lists, but I was just trying to confirm that what we've got designed here are things that are natives or water-wise plants and turfs and trees and things of that nature.
Yes, so far, the plans include the specifications for trees throughout the development, as well as shrub material to be planted on the non-river side of the concrete trail. So the trees selected for the project so far are water-wise selections. And the shrubs that are identified so far on the non-river side of the trail are currently located in a swale and thus are more of a riparian type of vegetation, that which you would find normally growing above the water level adjacent to the river. Does that answer your question sufficiently?
And turf grasses?
We have only identified very small portions of a turf grass for the project. We've identified most of the project will be seeded grasses that the HOA can manage and they can choose to mow or not mow.
Good. And I can't find it right now, but the other question I had was what was the total quantity that we're anticipating for actual number of people being in this, if fully occupied?
So if you use HUD, their requirement, they have 2 people per bedroom.
Right.
And what's that?
I was remembering 170 or 180 or something.
I think that's pretty close. But as you know, HUD, that's the worst case scenario.
So using 3.5 per unit, it's 133. So somewhere between that and 175. I don't know what the number is here. 2 per bedroom, that's a lot.
Yeah. So,
What's your thinking there, Russ?
Well, my concern is just the whole thing we're getting ready to potentially approve tomorrow for this water use.
Water.
Do we actually have capacity? I know there's maybe a lot of them. With all the other developments that we've already endorsed at this point, we actually have capacity.
You know, the town engineers always assured us that we have like 30 to 50 year capacity. The thing that I think we're all struggling with at this point is that was assuming kind of historic flows coming out of the Snuffles Range. And I think what we're all grappling with right now is that,
We've had water restrictions in the last 3 years.
well, and we're realizing that historic flows they're probably not going to be historic anymore.
So that's where my concern is.
They're prehistoric.
So I think your point's well taken.
It seems like a bigger question moving from here to developments that perhaps aren't so far along and slowing that all down.
Yeah,
We're pretty far into this one.
We are. I'm just trying to figure out when that is. When do we actually
Yeah.
say,
and I do.
because how far are we going to overcommit before we get to?
Yeah, and I think that's our job on council to really start grappling with that.
Okay.
Totally hear you.
What about development moratorium?
Eventually, right?
It may come to that, but I don't think,
Yeah.
I don't think we're there where we can, you know, I think we'd be opening up a huge legal can of worms if we thought we could right now say, we're going to table this because we're not sure if we have enough water for it.
And that was not my intent to try and table it.
Understood.
We've made a lot of progress here, but I just want to make sure we're thinking about this.
Again, that's the sort of thing I like having just in the minutes so that historically we can show that we've been talking about this. We've been thinking about it. So I think it's a really good point.
One thing I just want to add to that is, I don't know exactly the detail of what you're talking about, but from a water use standpoint, just want to point out that they're proposing raw water, non-treated water for all irrigation.
Good.
So the water use that would normally be calculated potentially for treated system is going to be less in this case because the outdoor water is going to be by raw water.
And we have that facility to provide that?
Yep. But, I can't remember the name of the district who's providing.
Tri-County.
Tri-County. So.
Okay. No, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
We're talking about having Tri-County supply raw water to this development.
Yeah, I believe so. Is that what we landed on, TJ?
I believe so. I think that that's still one of those things that seems a little bit nebulous, but that's the concept that's been presented, and everything that we've gotten from Tri-County supports that. I think Joanne has a couple of detailed concerns about how, but
But it never got to a point where she
correct,
overly concerned.
correct.
Okay, well, and it must be because it's raw water that it's not an issue.
Exactly.
Yep.
The raw water.
Yeah.
All right, gotcha. Non-potable is the former town attorney always insisted we refer to it. Well, I'm pretty comfortable with where we're at. Anybody else have any?
I'm good with it.
I'm impressed with the quality of work you guys have done.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's a nice job.
Thank you.
amazing.
You're the architect?
Yes, one of them.
And thanks for having that sidewalk on the back.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
At the end of the day.
People were letting go that way when you put it in there.
We call those desire lines in school, and you see them in the quads and universities. And there's a couple of them here. It's quite evident.
Yeah, they're common. See them a lot. All right, well. Are you going to dive in?
Good.
You want to?
Sure.
TJ already read it. Can't you refer to the,
Yeah, so I'd like to make a motion to approve the preliminary plat for Riverfront Village Planned Unit Development Triangle Subdivision, Lot 1R, to be determined Highway 550, with the conditions that TJ noted in the beginning of this meeting and are noted in the staff report. And I would also like to add a condition to have another legal separate emergency access for the development.
I'll second that. Have a motion, have a second. Any further discussion?
May I just clarify something? The secondary access is for emergency access?
Correct.
Correct, not a
Right?
Yes,
full access.
did I say legal separate emergency access?
Okay, sorry, I might have missed that, but I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, you have a motion, you have a second. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Let's do roll call.
Okay.
Please.
All right.
Yes, let's read that.
Howard Thomas.
Call for the vote.
Yes.
Commissioner Ambleston?
Aye.
Montague?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Meyer?
Aye.
Mayor Clark?
Aye.
Chairperson Canright?
Aye,
Hey, there you go.
thank you.
Thanks
you all.
for everybody's work on this.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
deal.
very much. Thank you, TJ.
Yeah. Big thanks to
We,
you.
we enjoy working with you all.
Been a long haul, but it's great to see you. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Anything else? Sir?
Nothing from staff, no, sir.
Move to adjourn or? Move to adjourn.
I'll second that. You can also just say we're adjourned.
Yeah, okay, we're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Thomas.
We're moving in the right direction.
Extremely happy.